Hey guys, it's Jamie, bringing you a special episode of Recovery Inspired Hope. And we're here at PLR, People Living in Recovery, in Athens, Georgia. We have a super exciting interview with Mr. Shane Sims. Everybody knows Shane. We were in CARES together, CARES 32. Best CARES ever.
Right.
So we're so super excited for Shane to tell us a little bit about how he got here, how he got to be the head of this amazing organization and all the work that you do in the community. So excited to be here. So tell us a little bit, first of all, give us your, how long have you been sober for?
Sure. I'm Shane Sims, person long-term recovery. What that means to me that it has been right at 25 years since I felt the need to take any mood or mind-altering substances. Yes,
25 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Look, when people get married and they have that anniversary, is that like the silver anniversary?
I would imagine it's a silver anniversary. but honestly, I try not to look for silver anniversaries because it keeps me motivated and it keeps me going forward. So
absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what happened in your life that you made a decision that you wanted to do something different.
Well, trauma, as it usually is, I've subscribed to the belief that a gateway drug is trauma.
Absolutely.
And I guess, and in my life, it took a turn for the worse, I guess, which started the progress for better. Back when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I had a very traumatic experience during that time of walking up on my parents doing the drug of crack cocaine. And it was traumatic for me because crack cocaine had pretty much decimated the families of my friends. And to me, I felt that my home was somehow immune to the destruction. And my parents, they were and are my heroes. But as it happened, one evening while my younger brother and I were playing in the hallway of our home, there was one room that my parents had been going to lately, and they would go inside the room and remove the doorknob. And so this evening, my childish curiosity got the best of me. And I kind of ushered my younger brother away from the door and made my way over, and I peeked in. And when I peeked in, I saw my parents doing what I knew to be the drug of crack cocaine. And it devastated me.
At 12 years old?
Yes, ma'am. This was 12 or 13 years old. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And you knew what the drug was?
I knew
what it was?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. By that time in Athens, Clark County, crack cocaine was so prevalent. I mean, and so you probably could hardly find a kid in his or her early teens or even late preteens that did not know exactly what it was.
Wow. So that kind of started everything.
Yes, ma'am. Of course, in hindsight, I realized that it destroyed my confidence in everything that I believe in, and probably including God. It did. And just looking back, and of course, everything is understood in hindsight much better. It was then that I began to kind of just lose my foundation. By late in my 13th year, I began to hang in the streets of Athens, Clark County, took on a new set of friends.
So you kind of went to find a new family.
That's basically what happened.
Wow. So I've actually heard of this. You're like the second or third person that I've heard that this is what you do when your home life gets shaken like that. Ma'am. You go find a new family.
Sure.
And unfortunately, we don't always find the best, most positive.
Right. and often it's often it's just a given that it's going to be a worse situation before it gets better. Because when you're that young, you don't know how to judge people, how to judge situations. You're just looking to be accepted, and for me, that was a big thing. I felt like, I guess you can say, a kid with no home, and I was looking for somewhere or something to be accepted, and it happened to be in the circle of people that did the opposite of everything that I was raised to believe was the right thing.
So you were feeling like abandoned and rejected.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
yes,
those
ma'am.
are huge things that I see in recovery and people. I struggle with them myself, abandonment and rejection. And looking to be accepted. When I was in high school, I found the family I was always looking for with people in high school who were smoking pot and drinking and doing, other kind of like high school psychedelic stuff, and that was where I found my family and my fit, my fit where I was accepted because I felt that abandonment and rejection.
And
wow.
That's exactly how it turned out. And I guess for me, what made it so bad, because my childhood had been so relatively stable. Had both parents in the home. I mean, I did well in school, Cub Scouts, football, social groups. And so it was just, I think the suddenness with which crack cocaine came to Athens and within my home, I think that was more traumatizing than anything else, because things literally began to change almost overnight.
And shook your faith in God.
And shook my faith in God. And shook my faith in God.
So tell me how things ended up getting put kind of back together.
Well, probably with the two loud sounds. The sound of a shotgun and the smashing of a judge's gavel.
Wow. One of those sounds were good.
Neither one was good. Neither one was good.
Wow.
By 13, as I said, I had begun to hang in the streets, and as my home life became more and more unstable, that's where I spent most of my time. By 14, I was drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana, and had a child on the way.
Okay.
By 15, it was just a completely different social circle, but somehow I managed to still do relatively well in school, and I think that was the one thing that I held on to. And however, by my senior year in high school, and when I say by my senior year, that was like years of just fumbling and just barely getting by and trying to stay focused. But my senior year was like, it was a breaking point for me. It's where I literally had to choose which path I wanted to travel.
Crossroads.
Right. It was. And during this time, I re-met some childhood associates. I wouldn't say friends, because I hadn't seen them since elementary school. And I re-met these guys during a time when the job that I was working at closed down without any notice. I mean, just like we came to work, we the teenage employees, and
it was almost again like your stability got shaken.
Again.
Wow. So it was like reopening.
It reopened a lot of wounds. Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
Yes, ma'am. And it's traumatic enough for me to remember the day. You know, even now at the age of 43, I could remember it just as if it was yesterday. You know, I got out of my car and came to the front of the restaurant. And I remember the owner standing on the lawn, and there were a couple of the teenagers that worked with me standing outside. And I thought it was just odd. And so when I walked up, he was like, you know, I'm sorry to tell y'all, I'm having to close the restaurant. And for me, it wasn't just about the money. It was just about the last sense of, as you said, stability that I had, and just that feeling of being betrayed again.
Yes.
And so during this time, I re-met these childhood associates, and I had been going to other job interviews, going to the poultry. And one of the things that happened is I went to an interview at the poultry, did well, and the lady, she was like, you know, this is going to be wonderful. But of course, when I took the drug test, I failed for marijuana.
Oh, man.
And she told me, she said, just keep your system clean for 30 days, come back, I promise you have a job. It didn't last. During these 30 days, one of my companions suggested armed robbery as a way of making some money, because by that time I did have bills. And initially I was like, that was way outside of my MO.
Right.
You know, smoke a little pot, drink alcohol, but actually hurting someone or robbing was way outside my MO. But association breeds assimilation, and eventually that conversation was had. They all moved into my apartment with me, and one evening it was just like, okay, and, you know, and they promised me, apparently they had done this before, it had become apparent by then, but they promised me, man, it's easy, you know, it'll go like this, no one get hurt, we'll get the money. And it seldom happens like that in real life, and it didn't in this case. So we did plan out an armed robbery of a golden pantry in Athens, and it went about as smoothly as they say, but at the end, when everyone was leaving out the store, for some reason, the trigger man, or my co-defendant, had the gun. He shot the clerk.
Oh my goodness.
At the conclusion of the robbery. And I can just remember that loud gunshot, and I remember the clerk screaming. And I was outside the store at this time, and it was just like, I don't know, like to say your life passed before your eyes.
Yeah.
And I realized instantly the magnitude of what had just happened. Long story short, I ended up turning myself in to the police. Did what I had to do, took responsibility for my role in it, and I was sentenced to life plus 15 years in prison.
Wow.
And I realized then that there was a chance that I may never get out. But the death of that clerk weighed heavier on me than my concern for myself. And one of the things I said, I would not let his death be in vain. And I said, going into that prison, I was like, if I never walk out again, at least I'm going to try to make a difference in this environment. And that was at the age of 18. And so I went in with the mindset of, I guess you can say, kind of atoning, or not kind of, actually atoning, for what I had done.
Yes. I know. I mean, talk about bad company corrupting good morals. I mean, that's just like one bad choice, you know, in the association of people you wouldn't normally, you know, do or hang out with, and your whole life changed.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And then I just think it's so amazing that, you know, even though your faith was shaken in God, the God in you was still very much alive.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I look back at that, and I'm so grateful for that. With my parents, with all that they went through with their addiction, and my subsequent addiction to marijuana and alcohol, I am so grateful for the foundation that they did provide me with. Even in the midst of their addiction, they would often try to tell me things they were not practicing themselves at the time, but it's things I had seen them practice, like faith in God. We went to Bible study, and I'm grateful because I had something to return to. When all else crumbled, I had something to return to. And just looking back, I mean, I was just speaking with a friend the other day. This couldn't have been planned any better.
Yeah,
I mean, the way that God orchestrated it, because I went into the prison system with something that I realized that majority of the men and young guys did not have, and that was a moral foundation.
Yes.
Most had been raised by single mothers or just in bad situations, never had a chance to develop a foundation. And so I had something to return to and stand on. And what ultimately happened is that I became the go-to person to talk to. Matter of fact, one officer who later on became a warden, she told me one day after about a year of being at Telfair State Prison, she's like, I know what I'm call you. See, your name, Counselor Sims. She said, every time I see you, you know, you're talking to someone or listening to someone, and that kind of that did develop, and that type of reputation in prison, it travels fast. And so my reputation traveled throughout Georgia for being a trustworthy individual, someone that can be talked to, and ultimately that tree, it bore fruit, and it led to me ultimately getting released from prison after just 20 years.
Yes. And tell us how you went from there to developing this amazing recovery community organization.
Sure. Yes, ma'am. Well, my belief, when you're serving a life sentence, it's unlike a 20-year sentence, because you don't see an end. You know, that's the parole board can very well deny parole, and without any or very little justification. So when you're serving life sentence, you have a different dynamic that you're dealing with mentally. And my thing was that I couldn't look to the hills, so to speak, for my release date. So what I learned is that when I gave of myself to other people, that's when I felt the most liberated, the most free.
Absolutely.
And once this concept idea crystallized in my mind, that's what I did. It's like I almost became obsessed with helping people, with being there. And I realized in looking back was that I was really fighting like hell for my own balance, for my own peace. And so I developed that, and eventually in prison I began to teach classes, mentoring classes to youth, began to organize programs and put on events, and ultimately started working in the administrative office in one prison, and from that one to two other prisons, which is a position of trust, because they're very selective about who they allow there. I mean, because you're literally a few steps from the front gate, and you're there with all of the civilian staff. You know, there are very few officers, but these are most civilian staff. And so that helped me to, I think, keep my humanity intact. I was able to keep my ability to interact, to socialize. And so eventually what I realized is that I think I have something of a gift. For giving to people, for being vulnerable about my own failures, my own hurts and pains. And so when I was fortunate enough to have 3 different wardens to petition the parole board for my release, I came home on February 3rd, 2016. It was like immediately I tried to find out how can I get involved in the community. And my first my first assignment was I was asked to join the Youth Gang Task Force, the Mayor and Commission Youth Gang Task Force here in Athens. And that was awesome because I was able to take my lived experience and advise the commission, advise the mayor, and even the gang task force here on what's the best approach or the best understanding interpretation of what was being seen amongst our youth out here. That reputation kind of spread it, and I was invited by one of the adjunct professors at the University of Georgia to help him to teach a community police relations class. So I did that, and ultimately I ended up leading that class. And
this is the amazing thing about Athens.
Sure.
Nowhere else do you see this kind of thing where people get, their lives restored and come back and give back and work with police, task force.
Yes,
three wardens petition you to get out. I mean,
right. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
That is just, it's amazing. It's so relevant that God is really has his hand, on your life and on this community.
On this community, yeah. And I had the benefit of being here, leaving and coming back. And I tell people now that Athens is progressive. It's healthily progressive now. And even in prison, you hear very little about the Athens Clarke County Police Department compared to the police departments across the state. And so coming back here, I'm grateful for the environment that I came back to. And Athens was actually considered the recovery capital of Georgia. I think that's awesome. But so just came back and just got involved. And after teaching the police community relations class for a while, I was approached by Chief Scott Friedman at the time and asked if I would be a chaplain for the Clarke County Police Department.
Amazing.
So yes, ma'am, that was at the end of 2016, and I remained the chaplain until today. And so just working and just doing what I do, the opportunity to come here for PLR when it was housed at the Sparrow Nest, someone brought that to me, and Jamie Scott was the first to tell me about it, and he said, just need a care certification, and that's it. And so I thought about it. Some time passed, and I went to speak at the DRC, the Day Report Center, for graduation, and the director of the DRC approached me afterwards, and he was like, what do you think about having a job here? And so I was like, I would love it. This is what I do. So again, the idea of CARES came up. He said, all you have to do is get CARES certified. And so it's like, okay, the second time is let me do it. And I did. I did CARES that day. I started CARES that time. And when I got my certification, when we got our certifications, I came back to Athens, and the same day that I made contact with the director of DRC about the job, I got a second call. I mean, literally minutes after his, from Sharon Taylor, who directed PLR at the time. And she was like, hey, I heard you got your CARES certification. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, well, what do you think about working for PLR? And I told her about my prior commitment. So she was like, well, tell you what, you'll be making this amount. So it's just like, So I did call the director of DRC, and I let him know, and he was like, man, go for it. He was like, go for it. You're just coming home, you're getting yourself together. And so with his blessings, I came to work at PLR as a recovery coach, as an outreach coordinator. Time went on, things happened, fate shifted things, and the position of executive director became available. And I accepted it with some trepidation because there was some funding challenges for the organization that I had to navigate. And fortunately, I was able to do so with the help of the community and a lot of support, a lot of prayer. We're now a thriving organization. This
house belongs to the Lord.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So
awesome. Wow, that is amazing. So thank you, everybody. Shane Sims here. And make sure you subscribe to Jamie Toll on YouTube. Make sure you come check out PLR. We are going to have the information on the screen here so that you know how you can get in contact with PLR if you need any services or anything. And thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on Recovery Inspired Hope.